one for me. But really what it is the mantra clears you. When we chant this mantra, it purifies our heart. We say, well, we're not, where we are with our practice, we're not where we want to be. We're not in alignment necessarily with what we want to be. And all of my great teachers have said, just keep chanting your mantra. The mantra purifies the heart. The mantra connects you. Stuff comes to the surface. Thank the stuff that's coming because it's clearing you. It's cleansing the heart. And the more we chant it, and the more that we become one with the mantra, we unify our consciousness with the consciousness of Krishna and get to experience that sweet transcendental realm and state and loving connection to the divine. And it's most blissful. Yeah.
Thank you, Prema. That was beautiful. I was wondering how to start the class today, with what meditation, and guess what? Krishna showed us the way, huh? Okay. So welcome to the second session today. The first session was a little bit about the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, and we will join up once again with the philosophy in the latter half as the day progresses, as the workshop progresses. Is the recording on? Okay, cool. So today we are going to jump straight into the war. Is it too loud? Too loud? Is it too loud? Is it too loud? Too loud? Is this comfortable for everybody? Yeah?
Yes.
Not?
Yes, yes.
Is this okay? All right. So that is beautiful. Then I'll use the microphone only during question answer. Okay. Anytime you all have a question, please ask for the microphone so that it gets recorded, because last time's recording, what happened was all the questions are muted out. We can't hear the questions, and that's part of the workshop. And I would like everybody to listen to that, and that's beautiful. So also, on that note, today I have cut out the question answer sessions totally. No questions are allowed. All right? Okay. So before we get into the war, here's a question from me. What did you do yesterday? Think about it. What did you do yesterday? Okay, I'm going to read something and see if you can relate to that. As it is, we are merely bolting our lives, gulping down undigested experiences as fast as we can stuff them in, because awareness of our own existence is so superficial and so narrow that nothing seems to us more boring than simple being. If I ask you what you did, saw, heard, smelled, touched, and tasted yesterday, I'm likely to get nothing more than the thin, sketchy outline of the few things that you noticed. And of those, only what you thought worth remembering. Is it surprising that an existence so experienced seems so empty and bare that its hunger for an infinite future is insatiable? But suppose you could answer, it would take me forever to tell you, and I'm much too interested in what is happening now. How is it possible that a being with such sensitive jewels as the eyes, such enchanted musical instruments as the ears, and such a fabulous arabesque of nerves as the brain can experience itself as anything less than a god? And when you consider that this incalculably subtle organism is inseparable from the still more marvelous patterns of its environment, from the minutest electrical designs to the whole company of the galaxies, how is it conceivable that this incarnation of all eternity can be bored with being? This is from Alan Watts on the taboo against knowing who you are or what you are. Well, as they say, most of us are gods. We're too scared to admit it, right? All right, so to Bhagavad Gita. Now that part of it was related to the philosophy of last week, which kind of leads into the non-dual philosophy, right? Now Bhagavad Gita is not about the non-dual philosophy. It is totally about living in the real world, about how we handle things and how we handle the disease given to us.
Paritosh.
All right, we are back on. Are we? Anna can hear me? Did she say yes?
Yes.
All right, good.
I hear you.
All right, so let's go. So we spent a lot of time last time about the history of the Bhagavad Gita and the philosophy of it. Let me just go straight into the Bhagavad Gita itself. And then in the later half, we'll have question and answers. So no questions as of now. I'll give you a complete gist of what happens, and then we will talk about it. So one of the things that is important for all of us to know that there were two sides. It was a war, so it has to be, there have to be two sides. So all you have to remember is that on one side, there were Pandavas, which were 5 brothers, and on the other side, there were Kauravas, which were 100 brothers. Okay? 5 brothers, 100 brothers, fighting over what? Land. Now, another important thing to remember, the 100 Kaurava brothers and the 5 Pandava brothers had common teachers. Dronacharya was their common teacher. He taught all the princes, right? And the great grandfather Bhishma was beloved by all of them. Okay, so they asked the Pandava brothers, they asked for their land and their kingdom back, and the Kaurava brothers refused to give the land back. And therefore, they said, we have to fight to get our kingdom back. And that's how the war started. Right? There is a lot to that story, but we'll get into all of that. But this is the simple framework of what is going on. Now, one of the Pandava brothers is Arjun. Arjuna was supposed to be the greatest warrior of them all, right? And he was leading the Pandava army, and his charioteer was Krishna. Now, Krishna is a friend of Arjun when the story starts. He's just a friend. And he said, at the beginning of the war, Krishna said that I will not fight, but I will drive the chariot for you. So he takes Krishna takes Arjun to the war. Now, as the two armies are facing each other, Arjuna says, I want to see who all are fighting. And he goes in the middle of the battlefield, in between the two armies, to see who all are present. And the Bhagavad Gita begins there. So chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita, so there are many yogas or paths to salvation, moksha, nirvana, described in Bhagavad Gita. Number 1 is Jnana Yoga, the yoga of intellect or knowledge. Number 2, Bhakti Yoga, which is the yoga of devotion, which was very, very ably demonstrated by Prema just now, the Bhakti Yoga. The third part, Karma Yoga, the yoga of action. But the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita is called Depression Yoga. Anybody knows about Depression Yoga? Depression. I'm joking, you don't have to write that down. I'll send you the presentation. But basically in chapter 1, what happens is Arjuna looks at all his friends and relatives and teachers and uncles, all on both the sides, and he knows that he's going to be killing all of them, right? Or some of them, because the war has not yet begun. So he gets very depressed and he complains to Krishna, why should I kill everybody, right? So that's the first chapter where he actually gets very emotional, breaks down, the bow falls from his hand, he sits down in his chariot and he refuses to fight. And then Krishna tries to get him to fight. This is like, hey, don't give up now. You're in the middle of the war, right? Or the war is just starting. And if you don't fight, people will take it for cowardice. And so he talks about that. So we will get into that, all right? So the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, sorry, what? That's fine. We're still there, right? So the first chapter is where Arjuna is getting depressed and crying and telling Krishna that I cannot fight. Second chapter, actually, there is a trick to studying the Bhagavad Gita. If you all are genuinely interested, and it's included in my presentation, which I'm going to email to all of you. If you study the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita totally, you will come to know everything that's in the 18 chapters. The balance 16 chapters are just explanations of everything that Krishna has told him in the second chapter itself. So first question from Arjuna is, why should I kill? And I'm depressed, so he gets very emotional. Now, when a friend comes to me and he gets very emotional about anything in life, what do? First thing I do is I give him intellectual knowledge that why you should not be so emotional, right? Normal. This is how we treat our friends. Intellectually, you are better than that. You should not be doing this. And this is not the way the universe works. Put out good energy and you'll get good energy back. All these intellectual things we tell our friend. Krishna is at that point exactly like us. He tells Arjuna the same thing. He gives him what we call the Jnana Yoga. In Jnana Yoga, he also teaches him a couple of things about how do you get Jnana Yoga? What is the process of Jnana Yoga? And included in that is the art of meditation. Okay? Then he talks about Bhakti Yoga. In Bhakti Yoga, he tells him another path to achieve salvation. And then he tells him about Karma Yoga, the yoga of action. So I'm going to read a few things, follow the story. This is a question and answer. It's a short story. I'm going to read that, and then we will get into the details of that. Fair enough? So big picture, and now the small portion of the dialogue, and then we'll get into the details of the dialogue. Okay? All right. So he says, and I'm going to read literally from a translation. It's not on the slides, so you don't have to worry about the slides. Just follow what I'm saying. So Arjuna tells Krishna, why don't you have coffee first? All right. So Arjuna tells Krishna, Krishna, my whole body trembles. My grip on the bow is loosening. I find it difficult even to stand erect. Then he says, I cannot slay my own kinsman, not even for all the 3 worlds, much less a kingdom. And then Krishna replies, this is your hour of trial, Arjuna. Such base despair does not become you. It is inappropriate. The call to battle has been sounded. Arise, take up your arms. To kill my own grandsire's brother, the great Bhishma, to kill my venerable teacher Drona, all for a kingdom? No, I would rather beg for my food than do such a thing. No, Krishna, I cannot fight. This is Arjuna laying down his arms. And many times we find that in our lives too, right? I cannot fight. And this is the first answer from Krishna. He says, Arjuna, everyone depending on his station in life has a certain dharma. You are a warrior. Your dharma is to fight for a righteous cause. If you, a warrior, shun fighting after the call to battle has been sounded, you will be setting a bad example. Think it over. There will be chaos in society if people fail to do their dharma. Now, dharma here refers to the way, not the core principles itself. Dharma has a couple of meanings, as we saw last time. Dharma is the core principles or the core philosophy, and dharma is also the way. So when he's referring to dharma here, he's saying the way, okay? Whatever work you are called upon to do, by virtue of your station in life, that you must do. You must not fail to do that work. So here the reference is made to, in Indian society or in Vedic society, there was something called Varna. Now, all of us know it today as the caste system, right? That we have the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Shudras, and the Vaishyas, or the Vaishyas and the Shudras. Now, each section of the society was supposed to be doing a certain kind of work. It became converted into the caste system after the Aryan invasion of that region. It came in from the Midwest, or not Midwest of America, but Midwest of that part of the continent. Originally, it was called Varna. It was class and not caste. So the class was based on your function. So certain people were more adept at knowledge. So they were supposed to be paying obedience to God or showing the path to salvation. The second group of people were warriors. They were supposed to protect the kingdom, to protect the people. Kshatriyas. Arjuna belonged to that. So here Krishna is reminding him that do your duty as per your responsibility and your station in life. And that applies to us here as well. Bhagavad Gita's message here simply is complete your own responsibilities as they have been given to you. How to do that will come to later. But it's referring to that. Whatever is your responsibility, whatever is your station in life at that particular moment, do that duty. Follow your own duty, right? Then he goes on to say, and he talks about Jnana Yoga, and now this goes into non-duality. It says, Arjuna, you grieve because you think you are the doer. Think of God as the doer. You are but an instrument in his hands. You are but carrying out his will. Resigning all your work to God, you must act. This is true renunciation. Giving up action is not. Giving up action is not renunciation. So do your job as God's will, right? Then he says, it is better for me, now this is Arjuna saying, if it is better for me if the sons of Dhritarashtra is the enemy king, and his 100 sons are called the Kauravas. So he says, it were better for me if the sons of Dhritarashtra found me unresisting and killed me. How can I kill my own kith and kin? Then Arjuna tells him, or Krishna tells him, sorry, Arjuna, you cannot kill Bhishma or Drona, nor can you kill Duryodhan or your other cousins. So Arjuna is surprised. He says, what do you mean? Won't my arrows kill them? And this is what Krishna says. He says, it's only the body of man that is subject to changes like birth, childhood, youth, old age, and death. The soul in man is neither born nor does it die. Weapons cannot cut it. Fire cannot burn it. Water cannot wet it. Wind cannot dry it. What makes you think you can kill the soul? Just as a man discards old clothes and wears new ones, the eternal soul sheds a dead body and enters another. Because you think the soul of man and his body are one, you believe you can kill or be killed. Truly, I tell you, the soul is not subject to any change. So Arjun is as perplexed as all of us here, and he says, what you say may be true, Krishna, but I fail to perceive the truth in your statement. And he says, that is because even though you are noble, you are still bound to the body. Men are of three types. Base men are dull and lethargic. They are steeped in ignorance. The greedy ones are ever active, trying to satisfy their cravings. They are passionate and restless. Then there are the noble ones who seek enlightenment. They are ever engaged in doing good deeds, but even they are bound to the body. You are no exception. So here he describes the three gunas. We do the gunas in yoga, right? Three gunas, rajas, tamas, and sattva. Or in the right order, tamas, rajas, and sattva. So he says three kinds of people. Number one, base men, dull and lethargic. Tamasic. That's tamas. The guna of tamas is in that, right? They are steeped in ignorance. Second gun, the greedy ones are ever active, trying to satisfy their cravings. They are passionate and restless. That is rajas. And the third one, then they are the noble ones who seek enlightenment. They are ever engaged in doing good deeds, but even they are bound to the body. That's sattva. So what happens, and we will see that, Prakriti is influenced by all three gunas at the same time. All of us are combinations of all three gunas, active in different proportions at different times. Even during the time of the day, or during a month, during a year, as we grow, the combination of these three gunas, tamas, rajas, and sattva, make our personality. So a little bit more sattva, a little bit less tamas, and a good portion of rajas. That's most of us. But sometimes the tamas becomes more, right? And sometimes we seek sattva more, right? So there is always an interplay of these three gunas going on in all of us, and that's what makes our personality. And because there are these three gunas, it makes different personalities. But the good news is that we are also capable of changing our behavior, because we can develop sattvic qualities inside us by yoga, by good food, by meditation, all kinds of combinations of that. But that's more pertaining to yoga. But if you see, Bhagavad Gita here now touches upon yoga as well. So Patanjali's Yoga Sutra and the Bhagavad Gita, they run parallel in their teaching. And many places you will see the crisscross. It's the same teaching coming from the Upanishads. This is one way of looking at it, and Patanjali's Yoga Sutra is another way of looking at it, but all of them have common components. Meditation is taught in the Bhagavad Gita, meditation is taught in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Dhyana, enlightenment is taught in the Bhagavad Gita. Dhyana and enlightenment is taught also in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. So these are just two different ways, and they combine beautifully. So, okay? Going on. It is only when the noble ones receive enlightenment that the bonds that tie the soul to the body are cut, and they attain perfect equanimity of mind. They become even-minded. Shita prana or Shita pragya. There is two ways of pronouncing this. You can call it Shita prana or Shita pragya. Both mean the same, right? Even-minded. So Arjuna obviously asks, what is this even-minded person, right? He says, what is the state of even-mindedness? How does such a person live and work and conduct himself? In that state, man learns to view pleasure and pain, honor and dishonor, gain and loss as the same. This is now Krishna describing what a person with even-mindedness looks, talks, and behaves like, right? Because of this attitude towards the results of his work, he's never tense. Therefore, he excels in his work. Even through your intellect, you can perceive the truth. You are not your body. So now, this is the Upadesha of Jnana Yoga coming in now. So now Krishna goes on to explain to Arjun what is Jnana Yoga. He says, knowledge is like fire. Anything that enters fire will never remain the same. Just as fire turns its fuel into ashes, knowledge burns away all the bonds that tie the immortal soul to the mortal body. So Arjuna is, of course, confused. Everybody following me so far, or you all are confused? Okay. So he says, Krishna, I'm tense and bewildered. I can't think. I can't follow your argument. And then Krishna says, Arjuna, it is only a mind which is attached to a body that gets tense and bewildered. Such a mind desires many things. When these desires are not fulfilled, it feels pain. It is angry with those who gave it grief. The fear that desires may not be fulfilled makes it tense and bewildered. Clear? Should I repeat that? The fear that desires may not be fulfilled makes it tense and bewildered. A boat can float steadily on water only in the absence of strong winds. Desires are like winds. They rock the boat of life violently. You have to remember Bhagavad Gita. Gita actually means a song, right? So a lot of it is poetry. And poetry is open to interpretation, right? And different people have different interpretations. But a lot of this is in poetry form. So try to imagine whatever comes up when these words come to you. And then I will translate it into dry Americanese with my slides later. Okay? So a boat can float steadily on water only in the absence of strong winds. Desires are like winds. They rock the boat of life violently. It is only when all the desires of the heart are abandoned that the intellect can perceive reality. And it is only after perceiving reality that can man become even-minded. An even-minded person does not shun action, but he is not moved by the effects of action. He is like the ocean, which remains unaffected by the pouring of the waters of mighty rivers. That's quite a visual. All the rivers join the ocean. Ocean doesn't get affected. And this tranquility of mind can also be achieved by the yoga of meditation. So before going to the yoga of meditation, now he goes on to describe what is the yoga of meditation. But before that, he says, an even-minded person does not shun action, but he is not moved by the effects of action. This is probably the most famous words of the Bhagavad Gita, which is quoted by everybody. So much so that people know it by heart, Westerners or Indians. And it goes, Karmanya vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Clear? Nice. Okay. Karmanya vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Right? It talks about doing your work without attachment to the fruits of that. We touched that in detail last chapter, right? So this is where he mentions that. Then he goes on immediately to tell him, all right, so let me tell you how you can achieve the grasp of true reality by meditation. So now he talks about meditation. He says the aspirant must find a quiet, secluded place. There he must sit on a clean spot and holding his head, neck, and body erect, he must meditate. Control of breath, pranayama from Patanjali. Eating of the right food from the yamas and niyamas. yogic exercises, asanas, but no meditation is possible without concentration. And no concentration is possible if the mind is full of desires. Therefore, the yogi should try to withdraw the mind from worldly things and make it dwell on the self. Again, Patanjali, Pratihara, withdrawal of the senses. As the turtle withdraws its limbs into the shell, withdrawal of the senses, Pratihara. Concentration of the mind, Dhyana Dharana or Dharana Dhyana, and then Samadhi. You see, in 4 verses of the Bhagavad Gita is entire Patanjali's process, the Yoga Sutra. Same thing. To perceive the truth through the intellect is difficult. The yoga of meditation is also difficult. The yoga of devotion, worship, adoration, prayer, surrendering yourself to the will of God is the simplest way by which you can cut the ties that bind the soul to the body. So after explaining Jnana Yoga, Krishna tells him, okay, so Jnana Yoga is difficult for a lot of people because absolute concentration, or what is called samayam, the Jnana Dharana and Samadhi, all 3 together are called samayam. So when you have absolute concentration, you can direct that concentration towards any object of your life or any questions that you may have. And that can make things clear for you. But that is very difficult because we are in human form. Desires come back, things happen, right? So then he goes on to say, there is an easier way. And that is the yoga of devotion, right? Last time we were talking about that. We spoke about tat tvam asi, that thou art. So there are 2 kinds of religions in the world. Mostly you can group them. Tat religions and tvam religions. That thou art. Tat is that religion where God is outside or you're seeking God. So Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism in some of its forms, like if you are Krishna Bhakt or Vaishnavite, Shaivite, where they pray to a God as the ultimate. So the duality is still there. You are connected, but there is still duality. Those are called Tat religions. Tvam religions are like Buddhism or the Sanatan Dharma in its original form, or Advaita Vedanta, or Taoism, where you look inside, you, tam, tvam, right? So when you're looking inwards to seek that, and most of these religions are, the tvam religions are based on non-duality, super consciousness, all right? So till duality is there, there is a God. As long as there is an I, there is an Ishvara, and we find a way to connect. So the Bhagavad Gita is about that, connecting with Ishvara or connecting with God, right? And you can proceed further from that and go on into non-duality, but that's not our subject matter here. So we are going to stick to salvation or moksha or nirvana, how we find it and how we find the real truth, okay? So he goes on to say, worship, adoration, prayer, surrendering yourself to the will of God is the simplest way by which you can cut the ties that bind the soul to the body. There are 4 types of devotees. There are those who worship God when in distress. Foxhole prayers. People know about foxhole prayers. Whenever I want something, oh my God, I want another Ferrari. Where's Tony? Tony, another Ferrari. God, where are you, right? There are those who worship God for the sake of material gain. All of us, right? Then there are the noble ones. Now don't name names here, okay? There are noble ones who worship God only to receive enlightenment. 3. And finally, a few noble ones, because of their intense devotion, see God. They see God in all and all in God and continue their devotion. Now here is the problem with Bhakti Yoga. Now in Bhakti Yoga, he says, you are thinking of God, or you see God in everything, and you see yourself in God, you see God in yourself, you see God in all human beings, right? There is a problem with that, right? Bhakti Yoga is, the example in the West you can give is of Ramdas. Now Ramdas was a follower of Hanuman. Hanuman is another example from another um, uh, Purana, from Ramayana. Hanumana was a bhakt of Rama. So that is a prime example of Bhakti Yoga. So you can chant, you can do prayers, devotion, all of that, right? But there is a problem with Bhakti Yoga. What is that problem? There is, right, right. Well put. So both Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga both have similar issues. It's not possible to remain in that state of intellect or meditation all the time. Even with Bhakti Yoga, we know that we see God in everything, and God is in everything. But it is not possible for us to remain in that state. So Yoga requires Chintan. Chintan means remembering 24/7, being in devotion to God. Now, when we keep coming back to the human form, or our human desires, they crop up, that is not possible. So that's Bhakti Yoga, right? But he explains that to Arjun, that this is what is possible. So by now, Krishna has uh, explained these 2-3 things, the Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, in small form to Arjuna. Now, Arjuna is a man of action. You have to look at it in perspective. He's not for want of a better word, the brightest bulb in that household, okay? He's a man of action. So first, if you remember, he started with emotion. I cannot fight this, right? There are many controversies about the character of Arjuna in the Mahabharata itself. People say that he did not want to fight the war. He didn't want to fight. The first problem was that he didn't want to fight. So he went there and he became very emotional that I should not fight. Now, when Krishna gave him 3 answers of why he should fight. 1, because it is your duty. 2, intellectually, you're fighting because you're just doing God's will. 3, even if you kill something or kill somebody, you're only killing the body. The soul is eternal. It never dies. So what are you worried about? Do your duty. So he explains what the soul is, what the body is, what your duty is, what your responsibilities are, and how you can realize this truth that I have just shown you by the path of Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Karma Yoga. All 3, you can use these paths to achieve moksha or nirvana or salvation, right? So now Arjuna has become educated. Moment you become educated, what crops up? Questions, right? So now he's taking the spiritual track and going after Krishna. So this is what he says. All that I have heard from you gives me the feeling that all worldly actions are evil. They spring from attachment of the soul to the body. I would rather renounce all action. Right? So now he's very clever. He says, you've shown me all of them. Why should I do anything at all? Right? So, and And this is what Krishna says. He says, the fact that there is no action does not mean there is no desire. A man sitting in solitude may continue to think of pleasure and the objects of pleasure. No purpose is served by keeping only the body inactive. So even if you're sitting in inaction and your mind is doing that, right? Besides, men often shun action because of lethargy and negligence. I can very easily become lazy and use my newfound spirituality as an excuse not to do anything. It's called living in a spiritual shell, right? Everything is, I'm very, very spiritual. Therefore, I shall not go out and engage with the world. We do that, right? Act, you must, Arjuna. No one indeed can keep aloof from action. Even the survival of the body calls for action. But Krishna, because of my action or those of others, I sometimes feel happy, sometimes miserable, sometimes angry, and even tense. And Krishna says, these are the usual effects of action. But there are a number of ways by which you can act and yet be free. By yoga of intellect, meditation, and devotion, you can be free from the effects of action. For an active man like you, there are two other ways. One is the path of renunciation, of which I have already spoken to you, doing God's will, renouncing it, any material gain. Think of yourself as an instrument in the hands of God, that you are carrying out his will. But simpler still is the yoga of action. So here, the real question that Arjuna asks is this: out of the three paths that you have shown me, what do you recommend for me? So there's the yoga of intellect, the yoga of devotion, and the yoga of action. What do you recommend for me? That's what he's in turn asking, right? In answer to that, Krishna does a very smart thing. So far, Arjuna knows Krishna only as his friend. So the Gita, the way it is written, it's like a dialogue between two friends, right? So Arjuna so far knows Krishna is my friend and he's helping me in this war by being my charioteer, right? Now, Krishna, to strengthen his point, tells Arjuna his reality of who I am, who I really am, right? And he says, I had revealed these great truths at the beginning of this age, thousands of years ago, to Vivashvat. Vivashvat is sun god. He told these truths to Manu. Manu is the original man. The word man comes from Manu, so original man. And from Manu's lineage are the Kauravas and Pandavas. So Ishwaku, Manu's son Ishwaku, Ishwaku's son Vichitravirya. Vichitravirya had two sons, Dhritarashtra and Pandu. Dhritarashtra's sons are Kauravas and Pandu's sons are Pandavas. So that's the lineage. So he says, I told these truths many thousands and thousands years ago to the sun. And Arjuna is now surprised. Like, you're my friend. How could you do that? You were born before the sun, right? He says, thousands of years ago, how do you mean? You were not born then. How could you have done it? You are certainly not older than Manu, the first man. He says, Arjuna, you don't know the truth about all this. Now listen, you have already lived many lives before without knowing it. As for me, I am not the man you think you know. I am the Lord of all that exists, the manifested universe as well as the unmanifested. At the end of thousands of eons, the manifested universe merges into the unmanifested. Again, it springs forth from there after thousands of eons. I pervade the manifested as well as the unmanifested universe, and am subtler than both. Arjuna, whenever there is a decline of righteousness and a rise of unrighteousness, I incarnate on this earth to protect the good and to destroy the evil. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirabhavti bharata. That's another shloka from the Bhagavad Gita, which is very, very famous, where he says, whenever there is a decline of righteousness and unrighteousness rises, I take birth again. And therefore, if you look at Indian mythology, there are 10 avatars of Vishnu. Vishnu has 10 avatars. Krishna is one of the avatars. So the first avatar of Vishnu was, anybody? Matsya, fish. Second was Varha, the boar. Third was turtle. Okay. Then Bali. Then Narsimha. Then Parshurama. Then Rama. Then Krishna. And then Buddha. And the upcoming avatar is supposed to be Kalaki, which we are still awaiting. And that Kalaki might be universal consciousness. So there is a progression in this, if you see. Life began, according to scientists, where? In the sea. From the sea to the amphibian. From the amphibian to the pygmy man, to the wild man, to the social man, which is Rama, to the conscious man, which is Krishna, statecraft, to Buddha, who's a man of bodhicitta, universal consciousness. So you see the growth, the way the human beings grew, and the 10 avatars of Vishnu are all in line with that. Right? And then the next one, it could be anybody's guess. It could be super consciousness, or there might be another avatar of Vishnu coming through. We don't know. Okay? But according to what I believe, it is just going to be consciousness. All of us connected in consciousness. And that's why we do all these things that we do, to raise the universal consciousness. Right? So Krishna goes on to say, I am one, indivisible and eternal. I am everywhere. I am the all-knowing. I am without beginning and end. I am beyond time. I am bigger than the biggest. I am smaller than the smallest. Just as the air abides in space, so also all beings abide in me. Space abides in air, but does not need it for its sustenance. So also I abide in all beings, and yet I am above and beyond them. So this he describes, that he is aham nirvikalpam nirakara rupam. I am without form, substance, name, but I am everywhere. This is his description of what he is. Mano buddhi ahankara chittani naham. That is from Nirvana Shatakam. It basically says, it's not the mind, the body, not the ego identity, nor the chitta. All of that is, I pervade all of it, but I am apart from it. If you remember my previous week's definition about consciousness, it's like how we said the idea of the light and the hand, where the light is falling on the hand. You can perceive the light because hand is there. But when you take the hand away, you cannot experience it, but it still is there. Right? So that's what he's trying to explain in this part. Then Arjuna does the big mistake. And he says, if you are all of this, can you show me your true form? Right? And then Krishna tells him that to see God is not possible for mere mortals. It is not possible. But I will give you divine vision so you can see my form. And he gives Arjuna for that moment divine vision and shows him his true form. His true form, as they say, is of Kala or Mahakala. Now that's a very subtle explanation of what goes on over here. Okay, it doesn't say that in a lot of translations of Bhagavad Gita that you'll find. Kala means time. time as the destroyer of everything. So in our scriptures, when a person dies, we don't say that he died. We say his time had come. Right? So when you finish your time on this earth, the bodily time, his time had come. So his time was over, per se. So time here, or kala, is described as the great universal truth. And that can be pretty awesome to behold. It's like, you can imagine a huge burning furnace which is swallowing up everything. And all you see is death and destruction. And that's the form that Arjuna sees in Krishna. Because Kala is the destroyer of everything. But what is the destroyer of everything is also the creator of everything. Because there's no creation without destruction. So it's a continuous cycle that goes on. And Arjuna is privy to that. He sees that for the first time and he gets totally shaken. Because so far he thought, goofy looking kid is just my driver. It turns out he's the capo de tutti capi. And he's like, what happened? Sorry, boss. And then he goes on to apologize to Krishna. It's like, hey, if I called you a dumb, you know what, please forgive me. And all of that happens, right? So this is what he saw. As Arjuna looked up, the light dazzled him. He saw in it all beings. It seemed to him as if he were looking at creation, the whole of creation, everything in creation, looking at the whole of the past, the whole of the present, and the whole of the future. All at once. It was a sight no man had seen before. It staggered and stupefied him. He was as if the observer of the whole drama of life. He also saw the 12 suns, the moons, and the stars. It was an endless panorama. If there were any limitations, they were not in the form that he beheld, but in the viewer himself. He saw all creatures on heaven and on earth in that form. Arjuna, struck with amazement, bowed before the Lord. I see you infinite and omnipresent. You are beginningless and endless. In you, the whole universe abides. Salutations to you. Then Krishna resumed his normal form. He said, do not be afraid, O Arjuna. You have seen this form of mine, which is indeed very difficult to see. If you are perplexed by the many conflicting theories that you have heard, abandoning all, seek refuge in me. He who works for me, he who looks upon me as his goal, and he who worships me, soon becomes free from attachment to the body and comes to me. Men of different faiths worship me in different forms for the fulfillment of their desires. Ultimately, they all come to me. Then he asks, what are the qualities of this man? So I'm going to see, if you notice, Arjuna again asks the same question. So at the end of Jnana Yoga, or getting this idea of what enlightenment means, what is enlightenment, Arjuna had asked Krishna, what does a man who has achieved enlightenment look like? What does he talk like? What does he work like, right? So Krishna gives him a small answer, that this is what you have to have equanimity, and you can achieve equanimity by meditation. Now here he gives a further explanation of what a man should be. He says, the one who has received enlightenment is the same in pleasure and in pain, in victory and defeat, in honor and in dishonor. He is the same to friend and foe. A piece of gold, a clod, and a stone are the same to him. Even such a man continues to perform his actions. Then he tells Arjuna, behold, Arjuna, I have nothing to seek in this world, yet I engage myself in ceaseless activity. If I don't, others following my example may sink into indolence and become inactive.
You are a warrior. Your duty as a warrior is to do battle for a righteous cause. Viewing alike victory and defeat, gain and loss, happiness and misery, get ready for the battle. Whatever you do it as an offering to me. Whoever does what ought to be done without thought for the fruit of that action is the man of true renunciation. He is the true yogi. He is the enlightened one. Therefore, arise and fight in the spirit of a yogi. Your duty calls you. And that's when Arjuna picks up his bow and gets ready to fight. So that, in a nutshell, is the question and answer between Krishna and Arjuna, right? So what are the main points in that? One, why should I fight? Krishna tells him you should fight because the body is imaginary. It's Maya, it's illusion. Only the soul is eternal, right? Then he says, why should I listen to you? He says, because I am not who you think I am. I'm this humongous entity, right? So what are the paths of me connecting to you all the time? There are the three paths: Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga. What are the pitfalls of Jnana Yoga? What are the pitfalls of Bhakti Yoga? What are the pitfalls of Karma Yoga? What does a yogi who attains realization and manifestation or manages to find the reality and merges with the true consciousness, what does he look like? How does he work? How does he act? And he says he's a man of equanimity who does not worry about pain or loss, victory or defeat. This is how he goes and says, okay, what are the steps to Karma Yoga? And he tells him, do your action. One, renounce everything and do it as the will of God, renunciation. Two, you can do Nishkama Karma, karma without selfless desire. He also talks about Sakama Karma. That means karma with desire, but within the realms of dharma. Okay, so there is an out for all of us. We can actually go out and make money if we do it in a proper way, but not to get attached to the material wealth we gain out of that, right? So the Bhagavad Gita is totally a book on how to engage with life as it happens and find salvation. It is not about renouncing the world. Whenever we say renounce or become a monk or do this, it's like we are going and sitting on a mountaintop and getting away from all this. It's not about getting away. It's about engaging with life as it is, as it happens, right? So we will take a break here for 10 minutes. That's the end of the story part of it. And then we'll get into the philosophy when we come back. So 10 minutes. Good? All right? Stop the recording. Oh, oh, easy, easy, easy. Sorry, what? Yes. teacher of the universe. Don, can you shift your asana slightly to the left or to the right, whichever way? You good? Okay, Don, you're fine. You're fine. You're good. Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't know that. Thanks for telling me after 6 months. Nice. All right. So we are going to begin this session with a little bit of question and answers only pertaining to the talk that we just had on that, okay? We'll try to keep it short. I'm going to pass the microphone to everybody so that the questions also get recorded. Thank you, Vida.
The three paths that you just described, do you choose your path or is that path chosen for you?
So the question, the three paths that were described, do you choose the path or is the path chosen for you, right? So technically, as I referred to before, there is varna, dharma, and karma. And a little bit of explanation is needed in all three. Now, if you go strictly by the philosophy of Sankhya Yoga and Bhagavad Gita, there is a duality. There is an Atma and a Paramatma. Like there is the individual Jivatma, the soul, and the super consciousness. And salvation means connecting to that, right? So by that definition, there is a super entity out there who's running the show. You are not. Your salvation lies in connecting to that super consciousness, right? Realizing that there is a super consciousness. Therefore, the super consciousness is allocating your varna or your station in life. And thereby, you get a certain set of responsibilities by birth alone, right? So your duty lies in fulfilling those responsibilities, your own responsibilities, right? Now, how you fulfill those responsibilities is the explanation of karma. How you do karma? Karma itself incorporates Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, both. We discussed this in the last class as well. Even though the paths described are three separate entities, the yoga of intellect, the yoga of bhakti, and the yoga of karma, three separate paths, it looks like that. But in actuality, even to do karma yoga, you need to have an understanding. You need to have jnana in you, a little bit of understanding of where you are going. Devotion, the path of devotion says what? Seeing God in everything, thinking of God all the time. Karma yoga also implies that when you do your action, there is a part of it which is called the upasana, which is worship, 24 hours doing your work as worship, and also doing your work by seeing God in everything, fulfilling that, right? So in effect, all three, the modalities might be different, but they all turn out to be actually the same, if you think about it. Right? Make sense? Well, like I always say, you can catch the nose like this, or you can catch it like this. You're still catching the nose. So 3 different explanations. The explanation is for where you are in your journey on your path of life. Whether your own personal intellect is open to understanding Jnana Yoga, or you want a simpler way of just follow direction and chant Radhe Krishna, or Sri Ram Jai Ram, or devotion, whatever your object of devotion is. If you just chant, you can be in that. Japa, it's called japa. You can follow that path. Or you are a man of the world, you have certain responsibilities and you follow your karma. So depending on where you are. So who chooses whom? Actually,
So it could be like a combination of both.
absolutely. Absolutely. It can be a combination. Most of the time, it is a combination. Right? Bhagavad Gita is for the man of the world. Bhagavad Gita, you have to understand the area that it was fought in is called Kurukshetra. That's the physical area. The real Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue between the man of action, Arjuna, and his own higher self, which is depicted as Krishna. It's a conversation inside us. And the battle is not fought on Kurukshetra, the battle is fought on Dharma Kshetra, or the path of Dharma. So it's an internal battle. It's a metaphor for that. Make sense? Thank you.
When you refer to salvation, what do you mean?
When I refer to salvation, what do I mean?
Yeah, in what you're describing, salvation.
Mhm. Okay, so here I have to talk about communication and words. So the Bible also says, right? With our words we create, or in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In effect, what does that make the Word? The Creator. With our words, we create. If you listen to, there's an old Aramaic statement. It's called abracadabra. And the magicians use it today. It's called abracadabra, right? When you say abracadabra, what happens? A rabbit gets created out of the hat. Actually, it refers to, with your word, you create your own reality. So, words cast a magic spell. That's why words are called spelling. You're creating spells. You create a magic spell. So you create your own reality. Now that reality is an agreement between me and all of us here to convey certain meanings. If I say Mike, there can be a couple of meanings to that. Mike can be someone's name, or mic can be the microphone that you are holding. But we are referring to that thing. Now in the scriptures, it's called name and form, nama rupa. The moment we start naming and giving a form to certain something, we are entering into an agreement that this shall be called a mic. So when I use a word like salvation, it is a meaning that gets conveyed to you in the form of that word salvation. It could be, I could use moksha, I could use nirvana, or any of the other words. Basically, it means the realization of truth. Now that currently, in our present form, that truth, Satchitanand, truth, consciousness, bliss, or the ultimate reality, it could be anything or any form. depending on where you are in your journey, right? So salvation can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. Take the word happiness. How about the word happiness? What does happiness mean to you and to you and to you? Happiness to you means driving a Mustang. Happiness to Tony means flying a plane. Happiness to me means going for a walk barefoot. But the meaning, the happiness part of it, that experience part of it, it's not something that one can describe. You cannot attribute a name and form to that. So salvation is just a finger pointing to the moon. Don't mistake the finger for the moon. The word is just pointing you towards a certain something. Okay?
Beautiful.
Thanks.
Oh, okay. Hi, Samuel. Love you guys. So for me, it's also that, there's different perspectives and lenses through which we can perceive who we are. And for me, the salvation is not being stuck, like the way that I look at one perspective that's so limited. This third dimension of consciousness that we're residing in together is very limited. We look at ourselves as this tiny little fragmented thing that's so teeny tiny small, and it's not who we are. It's not who we are. It's one way of seeing ourselves. So for me, the salvation comes from this being able to wipe that slate clean, to understand that that's just that's beginning to maybe scratch the surface, and that there's so many other dimensions of consciousness that we can reside on with much less suffering, much more bliss. And we can reside as understanding that we're the unified field of consciousness, or we can decide that we want to play in a loving relationship with the divine and higher realms of consciousness and beauty. But it's that understanding that we are way more, that what we are seeing is not the truth, is not reality. We have created this whole thing based on our belief of who we are. And just like we created it, the minute that we stop believing in that, and we start seeing ourselves differently, that we can and will be and are so much more grand than we ever imagined.
Thank you, Prema. Anybody else? Mike, do you want?
I just have another question.
Sure. Go ahead.
So Arjuna and Krishna. So there's, yin and yang, the creator, the destroyer. We evolved from the primordial soup. The universe came from the Big Bang, organization, entropy, evolution. Would the nature of consciousness, or like if I was Arjuna and I asked Krishna, so what is your nature? Is your nature creativity? Is your nature evolution? Is your nature towards a higher form of consciousness? Like when you said we develop language, then we can define our reality. I just wonder about the Bhagavad Gita and to address the nature of the organization. We're going up, higher beings. Now we're humans. We used to be barbarians, like all of that. Is the true nature of that towards higher states for Krishna?
Okay, so the question is,
I know it's a long question.
to make it more concise, you are asking what is our true nature, right? In one word, according to our scriptures or the Vedas and the Upanishads, our true nature is simply stated in the form of Satchitananda. Satchitananda means truth, consciousness, bliss. End of story. Short and sweet. Sat, truth, Chit, consciousness, Anand, bliss. That's description of the true nature of the consciousness or the ultimate consciousness. But there you have to be very careful. Now you are heading towards non-duality. And again, let me bring you back into Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is about still there is duality. There is a connection, but there is a duality. There is an I, there is an Ishvara. And we are talking about connecting to Ishvara or achieving moksha in this life, right? So there is a process involved in that. Realization of who we are and how we connect. That is Bhagavad Gita. The question you are asking is better addressed with Kena Upanishad or with Katha. On next Sunday when we are doing with the Gita, I'll touch upon that, even though that's not part of Bhagavad Gita, but we will talk about the non-dual aspect of it also, right? But just in short, your answer, according to the scriptures, what has been stated, what has been heard, whether it's in Shruti or in Smriti, what it is called is Satchitananda, truth consciousness, please. Okay? Good for now? Jen?
So in this incarnation, we need contrast, we need duality. It seems like even though we're seeking non-duality, we need to almost appreciate non-duality, that contrast of like versus dislike and moving towards things. Because, for instance, this is a small example, but I've always been very politically motivated, and this year I felt like I was making a decision to not vote because I didn't want to choose sides anymore. I wanted non-duality. I didn't want to choose players. I don't want to choose that game anymore. I don't believe that different players in the broken system changes the system. So I chose to not vote, thinking that I was moving towards this concept of non-duality in terms of political agendas. All sides. I wanted all sides, not one side. And I didn't want to choose that one side was right or better than the other. And yet I'm hearing that we actually need duality in order to understand consciousness or understand what is and isn't consciousness. I don't know.
Addition to that question?
So just off of that, and then I don't want to rob you of his answer because mine's not an answer, it's just a piggyback. But it's funny, throughout that entire what we just did before the break, you know, I'm racing here and there in my mind. And the point of peace that I had was after all of that, I simply kind of received the message, why do you have to fight? Because you are a warrior.
Right. So the question that Jen asked, are we seeking duality, or is it about seeking non-duality? Bhagavad Gita is none of that. First of all, you're not seeking duality or non-duality, right? Bhagavad Gita is just telling you in the world of action what your karma is. Karma simply means action, right? So you are actually standing exactly where Arjuna is standing. Arjuna was in the middle of a war between two sides, right? But you are, what you just asked me is the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. And the answer lies in the Bhagavad Gita. Not voting is not an answer. It's not an option. Your karma is to vote. Simply. Whether not, so coming back to the duality part of it, we already are in duality. We are already there. As long as you realize yourself as Jen and me as Paritosh and Prema as Prema or whatever, You are part of duality. The moment we are born, the moment we recognize this self, I. Moment I starts, your duality begins. There is everything else and then there is me. And that's where all the problems also begin. So without getting into the question of going from duality into non-duality, Bhagavad Gita addresses what to do when you are in this real world to reduce your own suffering, as Prema pointed out earlier, right? To reduce suffering. Inaction is not the answer. Inaction is only inaction of the body. What about your mind? Is your mind inactive? You still have a question whether I should vote or no, correct? If you have that question, that means your mind is not at rest yet, right? And that's what Krishna tells Arjun also. Karmanya vadika raste ma phaleshu kadachana. Do your deed without getting attached to the fruit of the action. But you can't go on to say inaction therefore is the answer, because inaction itself means your body is in a state where you're not taking any action, but your mind is still filled with desire.
I want to take back, that's what my comment was, to be honest, is about the whole attachment thing. The reason that we're here in the first place at this dimension of consciousness is because we're attached to it. We don't exist. Every dimension of consciousness that we ever exist has to do with attachment. Where our attention goes, that's where we move on.
Right.
So if we're here, we want to be here, and we have wanted it enough that we show up in this form. So the idea is the only way that we move eventually out of this form, if we want other forms, is to want for something else eventually. Eventually you want for nothing, but to have to other places, because where our attention goes, where our desire goes, where our wants go, that's where we get to reside, right?
Right.
So if now we put our attention somewhere else, the attention on the divine realms or whatever, eventually we will no longer be in this state of consciousness, and we will eventually, that desire will drive us to other dimensions of consciousness. And if we put our attention somewhere else, which is, on Krishna, let's say, and Krishna consciousness, and we're there all the time, eventually we will show up residing in the realm of Krishna consciousness. The idea is that we use this desire to feel, like, I think for me, like, you can use desire to feel good, desire for, sattvic purposes, and that's where we start, and that fuels us to grow. Eventually, the desire dies out, but I think that there is a positive place for desire, where there's a desire in our heart to serve God, the desire in our heart to advance our practice, to know more, and to do the work, the desire to do the work of practice that gets us there. And eventually we even let go of that. And when we let go of that, we no longer have ties to anything at all. We exist in everything. The only thing that ties us is, again, that desire to be tied.
Thank you, Prema. Anybody else? You had a question?
No, I think mine was just more about, I think mine was just more of a comment. I think that he kind of freed himself when he finally kind of like understood his place in the world. Then kind of like, kind of piggyback to what you were saying, that he kind of like refused to understand that he actually needed to be a warrior. And he just kept questioning as to like why he needed to fight this war and why. And then he just kind of like freed himself and was able to relieve all this tension and all this depression, like you said, and all this stress he had when he finally really understood what his job was and what his position in this big planet, this biggest scheme of things that Krishna was telling him, well, you were born to fulfill this role. So when he finally understood what his job was and when he was able to fulfill what his plan of action was and what his karma was.
What his duty was. Right. Yeah. So Bhagavad Gita is all about how to live and interact with this world. I'll give you a similar example from Buddhism. Okay. Maybe this will make it clear. In Buddhism, you all have seen the statue of the laughing Buddha? Big fat Buddha, right? His name was Budai, right? And Buddha used to carry a bag of toys on his back. And he would go from village to village and he would roll in the mud and play with all the children, give them toys. Now, in Buddhism, the monks are very austere and, chanting and all of that impression that we get. And all the elder monks were very annoyed with Buddha. It was like, this is no way for a monk to behave. You should not be doing all this playing around with children and all of that. So one of the senior monks decided to go after Buddha and kind of teach him a lesson or put him in his place or whatever. So Buddha was walking along with his sack and this elder monk came and says, Buddha, do you know what bodhicitta is? Bodhicitta actually means awakened consciousness, right? Bodhicitta. So that's the aspiration if you follow Buddhism. So he asked Buddha, do you know what bodhicitta is? Buddha didn't say anything. He simply took his sack and put it on the ground. The elder monk was a little taken aback. And he says, do you know how to achieve bodhicitta? Buddha simply picked up the sack, put it back on his shoulder, and kept on walking. And the elder monk fell at Buddha's feet and said, I'm sorry, please forgive me. You know what that means? It's simply this: how to achieve awakened consciousness, or in this case, Krishna consciousness, is to simply put down your worldly bag. What is the process? Pick it up and continue with the path, is to engage in life. The path of meditation, the path of jnana, the path of karma is not one of inaction or secluding yourself in a spiritual shell. It is about engaging with life as it happens, with renouncing material gains. It doesn't say material gains are bad. It says renouncing it. Don't get attached to it. Karma for the sake of karma, which is called nishkama karma. There is another factor to it, which is called sakama karma. Karma with desire, but in a dharmic way. That's called sakama karma, like not doing things outside dharmic principles, like cheating, lying, any of those, right? So that accumulation of wealth, right? Accumulation of wealth is frowned upon if you look at it in a bigger picture. Our Vedas never say accumulation of wealth is bad. We have a goddess of wealth, Lakshmi. People pray to it, pray to Lakshmi, right? Accumulation of wealth is fine. What you do with that wealth is more important. And how you are attached to it is more important. You should not be attached to whatever you gain. But karma comes into the play here is because you have to take action to accumulate that. And you can use it. You can make hospitals and libraries and make or feed homeless children or whatever you want to do in this world, which is dharmic. You can use it for that. If you accumulate wealth and you keep it to yourself and you sit on top of it, that's greed. That leads to, as in the West we say, bad karma. In this thing, we don't have anything bad. Yeah. Well, you can look at it that way. Yes. Yeah. Okay. You wanted to say something, Prema?
Use it from that perspective,
and we pass it on from the perspective of serving the divine, it changes the relationship to it.
Right.
All of it has to be, it's the approach of it as a enjoyment of the beautiful things and experiences that we have been provided with, that have been gifted upon us for whatever time they are, and infusing that much love that's been infused into us and how we approach whatever has been given to us.
Nice. In one line, we like to say, we are keepers of divine providence.
Right. And
Just
even-
pass it on.
Yeah, and even in what, in the suffering, you just even approach it, but whatever we view as suffering, but we approach it as an opportunity, just love with love, whatever's been given to us, and as being a divine gift,
Mm-hmm.
all of it, and then give it up to the divine.
Right.
I had an experience, like I tell you, that I had to put that into practice. It was one thing to say it and one thing to put it into practice personally. So 3 years ago, I had a safe in my house, and I moved to Ocean Ridge, and somebody broke in my house in 7 minutes and took my safe, took everything in it, passport, social security cards, all the jewelry from all my lineages. I have great-great-grandparents' jewelry in there. And so at that point, the lesson came into play for me. And for me, it was, how do I approach the situation? How do I approach this? Thank you for the gift, universe, of having given me this abundance for as long as it's been given to me. I bowed, and I was with gratitude, and I say, may it serve the next person as well as it served me. And that's, the gift of abundance and how we appreciate the abundance and let it go.
Mm-hmm.
But
Thank
all
you.
that's enough to get there. The
So-
initial instinct is right to, like, it's my stuff, I want to hold on to it. But then you remember these teachings, and then you let it go. And when you let it go, there's no angst. The angst disappears with it.
Right. Pidu? Okay, so with that, what Prema just described was Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga in action. And I'll tell you what is Karma Yoga in action. Same thing happened to me when I moved to New York. My house was broken into. Everything was stolen out of my house. I was like 6 or 7 weeks into this country, absolutely new. Everything stolen. And I was very, very angry because the guy actually tried on my jackets and left some of them behind. And I was angry that how dare he not take this favorite jacket of mine? Like, why does that not meet his standards, right? But when the cops came, what was I doing? I was sitting and playing darts because that was the only thing left in my house. I was playing darts. So the cop asked me, why are you playing darts? And I said, because it's there. That, according to me, is my karma yoga. But anyway, let's proceed with this. We'll come back to question and answers again after we finish with this section, okay? So last week we stopped with consciousness or Chaitanya. So today let's start with samsara. So what is samsara? Philosophy. So all this that I'm discussing is all from the perspective of Bhagavad Gita, what it teaches us. All the explanations from chapter 3 to chapter 18. Do we have the right slide? Yeah. Samsara. So what does samsara mean? Sid, would you like to come this side and sit here? Oh, okay. Just make yourself comfortable, guys. So this is Krishna's teaching. It's not the exact meaning of the word samsara. This is what Krishna has to say about samsara. So what he says about samsara is this. Samsara is this world that we live in, right? This world is where we belong. The wider world of consciousness is our native land. We are meant to explore, to seek, to push the limits of our potential as human beings. What Prema was saying earlier. The world of senses is just our base camp. We are meant to be at home as much in consciousness as in the world of physical reality. So we are comfortable here because we think we are real. We think we have a physical reality. So we are comfortable, right? The moment we talk about this world of consciousness, we become like, ah. But we are meant to be comfortable in that reality as well. So that's what Krishna teaches Arjuna about samsara, that there is a super consciousness and you are meant to be comfortable in that. Then what is this world? Why is this world? Maya. We come to Maya. Maya not as in the mother of Buddha, whose name was also Maya, but Maya. Maya means illusion. Nice. 10 points. So, in the unitive experience, every trace of separateness disappears. Life is a seamless whole. Okay, now I have to preface this to last week again. When we understand consciousness, the explanation of consciousness, right? This is my hand, it's visible. It's in my perception, it is true, it exists. And that is Maya, the illusion that this really exists. That is our Maya. But that is our perception and that is our reality, right? We clear with that? This was in detail last week. So in the unitive experience, now here we are talking about non-duality. Now, Bhagavad Gita refers to that obliquely. In an angle, it goes to that and then comes back and says, let me not confuse this man of action. So in the unitive experience, every trace of separateness disappears. In that realization, I am connected to the superconsciousness. So separateness disappears there also. But note, here, he's not saying that this is non-duality. He's saying there is still duality. The idea of separateness disappears. So I can be complete with a connection. So there is me, and there is Brahman, and there is a connection. Therefore, no separation. In terms of non-duality, we say there is no connection also. There is only Brahman. Fine point, but to be understood here. So that's why there is the school of Vedanta and the school of Advaita Vedanta. I personally follow Advaita. So all this I look at from that point of view. But here the distinction has to be made very, very carefully. So there is Vedanta and there is Advaita Vedanta. In Vedanta, there is an Atman, there is a Paramatma, or there is individual soul, Jivatma, and there is a super consciousness. And we are all connected. It's like there is a sun and there are little droplets of that sun, the sunshine, right? Each of those droplets is a complete sun by itself, yet connected to the sun, right? So that's the analogy here. So we have to remember that. We are still not talking about non-duality. But in that unitive experience of me being connected with the Brahman, right? Every trace of separateness disappears. Life is a seamless whole. The body cannot remain in this state for long. And after a while, awareness of mind and body returns, and the conventional world of multiplicity rushes in. The unitive state has to be entered into over and over until a person is established in it. Now, this is the practice. Take the example of Buddha. We talk about nirvana, right? Buddha attained nirvana. He did not remain in that state over and over. He had to establish himself into nirvana to realize the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Then he came out of that and he gave it to us. In our process, what Buddha, the process that he follows of meditation, right? Same process, meditation. Another way to, so we have what? Dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, which is concentrating on something, having uninterrupted concentration on something, and reaching samadhi, and then getting established in samadhi. So 3 parts, dhyana, dharana, samadhi, right? And then the 3 together are called samayam. Now, when you are in that state, being established in that, then you can focus that into various things in your life to obtain an understanding of that. The stories are told, basically, our rishis and munis sitting down here on earth, they did not have the instruments of telescope or whatever. How did they know what is going on in the cosmos? They say that if you are in that state of samadhi and you just concentrate on the pole star, you will be able to understand the entire universe and the formation of that. If you concentrate just on your throat chakra, you will understand the functioning of your entire body. And these are the various stages that people obtain when they practice meditation. These are the byproducts, all the byproducts that we get. What do you experience with people who can read auras, or who talk to spirits, or who can read your palm or read your forehead? These are accomplishments of various people. True or not true? I don't know. It's open to discussion. But what it says here, it's possible that you can achieve those states. And the multiple consciousness levels that Prema was talking about, you can achieve all of those. But again, here, be careful. A lot of people come to my meditation classes and they are like, I see colors. I connect to the Akashic consciousness, right? All those are possible. People go for, what is it called? What? Out of body experience? What is that called? Lucid dreaming, or astral projection, right? All of those. Are they possible? Why not? Right? But here is the point with this, with all of this. If you get attached to these accomplishments, you lose sight of the main goal of moksha. If you get attached to this. So suddenly I'm able to see your aura and predict your past, present, future. I'm very good at predicting present, by the way. So no. So I suddenly get this accomplishment that I can read your mind, right? And I'm so happy with that. And I become like, I can read your mind, not yours, Don. I can read people with minds, but no, I'm joking. But what happens is I get so enamored by that achievement, right? And then what happens? Moment that happens, I'm happy in that one achievement itself. That becomes the fruit. Oh, I love this. This, Bhagavad Gita says, is low-hanging fruit. Low-hanging fruit is easily achieved goals. And we lose sight of the main goal, which is the realization or the connection with the superconsciousness. Okay? Once established, even in the midst of ordinary life, one sees the one underlying the many, the eternal underneath the ephemeral. Maya becomes the creative power of the Godhead, the primal creative energy that makes unity appear as innumerable separate things with name and form. Nama-rupa. Right? Nama-rupa is the first thing that we do. We give it a name, we give it a form. What are the cons of that? What is the problem with Nama-rupa? Perfect. We pigeonhole all our experiences. Name and form, yeah, like what, right, right, right. Absolutely. That's right. So it's said in English that the moment the child learns the name of the bird, it stops listening to the song. Isn't that what it is with us? Now, when we come to a class like this, everybody, they listen to the words coming out of my mouth. And what is your brain doing? Assigning it chambers in your brain. This is like this, this is like this, this is like this. Therefore, it goes in this chamber, this chamber, this chamber. Therefore, this teaching is like this teaching is like this teaching, and this teaching is like this teaching. So everything is, what happens? You learn nothing new. And if you learn something, sorry, you have, if that, because when you compare, you are not accumulating anything. You're just slotting it down into a pigeonhole of your mind, comparing it to similar. Now, you're not doing it deliberately. This happens automatically. Your hypothalamus, your subconscious brain is in full flow. It's comparing things, pigeonholing things. What happens when you hear things which you don't understand or don't like? Immediately, go ahead.
Well, I think that for me, meditation has been hard in the past, and I concentrate too much like on the outcome of like what's gonna be like, so I have to like, erase everything out of my mind, and I need to be like in this like blank slate when I let it happen and like just be present in the moment.
Yeah.
It's easier, and I get to experience actually what is really happening on the immediate moment versus like, oh, I need to have like, stuff having a racing mind or all these, thoughts or that kind of stuff. It's easier, but I just concentrate on what's happening.
Right. So you're talking about problems with meditation, and if you just concentrate on what is, so that's part of what we said earlier, what not to do, not to get attached to the outcome or being open to accepting whatever is happening. What I'm saying is, what happens when we hear something that is not there already in your store capacity? Brain automatically rejects it. Raga, dvesha, likes and dislikes. Like something, we absorb it and we pigeonhole it. Dislike something, immediately reject it. Both cases, what are we doing? Learning nothing. Right. And what Mark just did was a perfect example of what we all do. We heard something and we compared it to the Tao, and Tao talks exactly like this. See, this is what we always do. It's not just you or anybody. Yeah. Here's the thing. All spiritual processes talk about exactly the same thing. The names and forms might be different. They all take you to the same path. Absolutely. So, yeah. Yeah. Right. Perfect. So that was the perfect example of what to do, right? So just concentrate on the sensations as fresh coming in and not to be moved by the sensations. That's a different way of being or approaching the same subject. So here we are discussing what is Maya, what is illusion. Krishna is explaining that to Arjuna. We think that this world is real, but it is really an illusion. So this is his explanation of what is the illusion. Then he goes on to say, on this level of experience, the separateness is real. Our mistake is in taking this for ultimate reality. This separation is real, but we mistake it as that this is the ultimate reality. This is it. I mean, we have achieved everything and there is nothing else beyond that. That's what it is pointing out to. So we are still in the world of duality. We have still not ascended to Superman state, right? So all it is saying is, don't mistake it for ultimate reality. The separateness is real in this form, right? So now we come to Sankhya philosophy. This might be, so Sankhya means numbers. The entire Bhagavad Gita explains why the Maya, why samsara, why the three gunas come together and how they affect everything, right? How the whole consciousness thing works. So I'm not going to get too much into the detail of Sankhya philosophy because it can be a little bit complicated, but I will explain this whole thing in short. How about that? So Sankhya consists of 24 tattvas, or tattvas basically means factors or ingredients, tattva, or the basic elements, right? 5 senses. We have 5 senses. Everybody has 5 senses, right? Normal people, all normal people have 5 senses. Who has 6? Very nice. You are ascended. Okay. All right. So 5 areas of sense perceptions, 5 sense organs, 5 organs of action. We all have 5 organs of action. All right. 5 elements: earth, air, fire, water, space, right? That makes it what? 20. 3 components of the mind. Mind in Sankhya philosophy has 3 levels. If you go deeper into Upanishad, actually mind has multiple levels. Like Buddhism has 7 levels, but we only talk in Buddhism about 4. In Sankhya philosophy, we talk about 3: Manas, Buddhi, and Ahankara. Okay? Or Buddhi is also Chitta. So Buddhi is the intellect. Ahankara is the ego identity. Ahamkara. Ahamkara means, aham means I, kara means maker. I maker. So ahamkara is what makes your I. Now what all you include in your I? When I say I am Paritosh, I am angry, automatically you put anger into yourself. That becomes part of your identity, right? I am depressed. Automatically you put depression into your identity. That becomes part of your identity. Scientifically speaking, what's the function of the brain? Protection, survival, right? First function of the brain is survival. little bit deviating from this topic, but it's kind of important. But coming back to that, function of the brain is survival. Survival of what? Of I, me, whatever I call myself, right? So myself includes my ego identity. My ego identity includes what? Mind and body. Body, the physical body, and mind, and all the attachments of the mind. I'm attached to my car, to my house, to my wife, to my bank account, to my lockers, to my relationships, to my job. Everything that you are attached to, the job of the mind is to protect it. Now, when you say, I am angry or I am depressed, what happens? You have made that part of your ahamkara, your ego identity. And what is your mind doing? Protecting it. When you sit in meditation, what are you trying to do? Get rid of the anger, depression, anxiety. Isn't that the practice? So if you're getting rid of something, what are you doing? You are actually killing it. So when you are angry, when you are anxious, when you are depressed, which is you, and you are trying to kill your anger, kill your anxiety, kill your depression, which is also you, your mind steps in and says, what are you trying to do? You're killing part of yourself. And my job is to prevent you from doing that. And therefore, the mind steps in and doesn't allow you to meditate. You get the picture? You see, mind is not, okay, in the West, we say mind is a product of the brain. So let's just go with that analogy, right? Mind is a product of the brain. But mind has neuroplasticity, right? Physical brain. So, but the mind has neuroplasticity. So the art of meditation, coming back specifically to your question, is simply using the mind to change your mind. We can learn, right? In meditation. But okay? Let's just proceed. So Sankhya comprises of these 23 elements, which are called Prakriti. Prakriti literally translated is nature. Nature. So nature includes 5 sense organs, 5 sense perception areas, 5 organs of action, 5 elements, that makes it 20, and the 3 sections of mind. Ahankara, Buddhi, and Manas. Manas is store consciousness. So store consciousness, intellect, and the ego identity. So these 3 plus the 20 organs of perception, areas of perception, action organs, and the 5 elements, right? So these 23 become Prakriti. Aside from Prakriti is Purusha. Purusha stands for the ultimate consciousness, right? The job of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, any kind of yoga or salvation, the definition of salvation is what? Joining Purusha and Prakriti together. Or the combination of, in other processes, combination of Shiva and Shakti. Or yin and yang, or whatever you want to call it. So Prakriti, Purusha, combining of that. Now Purusha is a constant. So where are the fluctuations? In the Prakriti, in all the sense organs, the way we perceive it, right? And that's what gives rise to the millions and millions and millions and combinations of things that we see and perceive, and we think it's real. Right? Let's see. I'm just going to finish these 2 lines and then come to you. Objects and senses are not separate. They are 2 aspects of the same event. Mind, energy, and matter are a continuum. And the universe is not described as it might be by itself, but as it presents itself to the human mind. So this is Sankhya philosophy. We're not talking about ultimate philosophy or anything else, just the Sankhya, based on which the Bhagavad Gita is written, right? So it is not described as it might be by itself, but as it presents itself to the human mind. It is not just an observable universe, but a participatory universe. In the act of knowing, the mind conditions what is known. You know that, right? In the act of knowing, the mind conditions what is known. Simple example of that. Can you see your consciousness in this? What is this thing called? Wooden, we'll call it a wooden striker, wooden striker. Can you see your consciousness in this? Now, when I say this striker is made out of wood, right? You can understand that very clearly. It's made out of wood. It is wood. But we give it a name and form, striker. Right? In a sense, what it is? Wood. In a sense, what is wood? You can go down. It's comprised of so many elements. So that's one stream of thought. But coming back just to this, it's not just an observable universe, but a participatory universe. How is it participatory? In the act of observing this striker, both this and I, we both come into existence. How so? I see this. I observe this through my eyes, through my sense organs. Therefore, this exists. But this does not exist if I don't observe this. To me, it doesn't. So in the act of observing this, I bring myself, of what I call this self, also into existence. Or if you guys are going into the scientific part of it, you know, the wave light theory of light, the wave theory and the light theory, how the particle behavior of the light particle changes when there is a camera attached which is watching what the light photon is doing. So sometimes it behaves in a wave form, sometimes it behaves in a light form. Right. Right. So that's what I was, the dual light, there is a slight distinction there. In the act of affecting the future, if you say, if you are affecting the path, right? In that case, you have to look at what is the definition of the past and the future. Right, right. In the linear way, yeah. How we understand in the dualistic linear way. Yeah. Yeah, it's Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty. Okay. Right. Yeah, that's right. Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why we have to, uh, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Aren't you limiting its existence just by seeing it? Because when you go home, you'll put the ball and the striker away, and tomorrow you will remember that it exists and bring it to meditation. So doesn't its remember, for example, confirm its existence? You can't smell it, you can't hear it, but it exists.
Right? You're right. The spoon doesn't exist. Yeah. So absolutely. So here's the point again. If you are studying the Bhagavad Gita, we have to limit ourselves. So I said before, Bhagavad Gita obliquely points towards non-duality. Chapter 2, verse 16 actually tells that anything that is born dies, right? So it doesn't have an inherent reality of its own. It is borrowed existence. Where does it borrow its existence from? From the observer, right? So that is the point. Like just on 216 alone, you can do a whole class, which will go into non-duality to answer your question and to your question, right? But we are limiting ourselves right now to the world of duality and to the Bhagavad Gita and how to function in this world, which is the Sankhya philosophy. Sankhya philosophy actually, if you look at it from the Advaita perspective, they say Sankhya fails. It fails precisely because of your question. Absolutely. Now that there is a spoon, what do you do with it? Right. You see, the Bhagavad Gita is a lot like what Buddha taught his followers, right? There was a very famous monk, saint actually, who was not Buddhist. He went to Buddha and asked him, is there life after death? Is there a super consciousness? Right? Do you believe in a God? Buddha didn't answer. After he left, his name was Vashigotha. So Vashigotha left, and Ananda turned to Buddha and said, why didn't you answer this man? So Buddha said, Vashigotha came in search of theories. I don't teach theories. I just teach suffering, what is the meaning of suffering, and how to get rid of it. The Bhagavad Gita doesn't teach going towards non-duality. What is the meaning of non-duality? It says, since you are born in this world, your reality is there. You are composed of this. There is a super consciousness. This is your responsibility. This is your duty. And if you do it like this, you will have less suffering in this life and will achieve union with the higher self. This is what the Bhagavad Gita teaches. It's not about looking at super consciousness or one of that. It does tell you that there is a reality beyond. Like we saw in the chapter on samsara. It says that this reality, it is the perception. It is the perception of the perceiver, and that is the truth. But there is a reality beyond that. But we are not. We are talking to Arjuna, who's a man of the world. We are engaging in this world. We are not trying to ascend to a different plane of existence. So we are in this world, and how to act and behave in this particular world based on the understanding of this. Right? So let's go. We came to this. These are all the detailed question and answers of chapter 2 and all of that, I'm going to address one of the most important thing in Bhagavad Gita, and then we are going to open it up for questions. Now, this is something which is not taught in a lot of Bhagavad Gita classes, and you won't find it in the Bhagavad Gita itself. The question here is, there is on one side Duryodhana, who's the leader of the Kauravas, the villain team, right? The captain of the opposing army. So on one side is Arjuna, who is the leader of the Pandavas. On the other side is Duryodhana, the name of the guy on that side. We'll come into all the names in the third class and what they all mean. It's much more complex than all of this. So there are two teams. Team A is Pandava and Team B is Kaurava, right? So Pandava, the leader is Arjun, and Kaurava, the leader is Duryodhana. Now, Duryodhana had 11 battalions in the war. Pandavas had 5. So, a war of David versus Goliath. Krishna was God. Is God. Right? He could have gone and explained the Bhagavad Gita to Duryodhana as well. He could have told him, hey, this is not the right path and listen to me and follow this. And he could have avoided all the bloodshed. Just for record, matter of record, 2800 years ago is when the Mahabharata war is supposed to have taken place in a place called Kurukshetra. If you go to Kurukshetra today, and it's a fact, the soil of Kurukshetra is still red. They say it's red from the blood of all the soldiers, but it is still red. And they found weapons over there. They are, oh yeah, I think I showed you all some pictures last time. No, but there are weapons that they have found which were. So Mahabharata could actually be a fact. We don't know. Possible. But evidence is it was. The war at least was. Anyway, so if Krishna had explained this to Duryodhana, this war could have been averted. Why didn't he do so? Why did God did not teach? He was God. He could have taught it to the opposite team also, right? Why did he not do it? No. So the difference lies in this. Krishna did go to Duryodhana and try to tell him not to fight the war and give the land back to Arjuna. Now, this is not in Bhagavad Gita. This is in a chapter before the Bhagavad Gita starts. And Duryodhana says this to Krishna. Janami dharma nachema pravatti, janami papam nachame nrivitti. Kenapi devena yadi sthitena yatha niyoktosmi tatha karomi. He says, Duryodhana was a good king. He was not a bad king. So he says, I know what is right, but I'm not able to practice it. I know what is wrong, and I'm not able to keep away from it. I act as I am directed to by some mysterious power that is seated in my heart. Now, this is a statement from Duryodhana, right? So when he makes a statement, like when you are telling somebody something, you are not open to learning anything. You get it? You are telling him like it is. I know what is right, but I'm not able to do it. I move as if I am directed by some mysterious force. That's a statement. No room for any answer. It's like, this is it. I'm not listening to you anymore, right? You can be. He's still very dead. Right. So there is that aspect to it, which is how much is pre-written and why you should not even have a war. That we have already handled. This is a part which is not in any schools or any Bhagavad Gita or anything that you will learn, right? So this is a chapter called, if you are interested, is called Shreya, Preya, and Kriya, if you are following that. But it's not part of the Gita itself. But this is very, very valid in our today's world and how it applies, and that's why I include it. So Duryodhan basically says, this is what it is. I'm not interested in knowing anything further. Same question was put to Krishna by Arjuna. He says, Atha kena prayukto yama papam charati purusha anicham api varshaneya balada eva niyojita. He says, why is a person impelled to commit sinful acts even unwillingly, as if by force, O descendant of Vrishni, which is Krishna? Now this is what? This is a question. Now the Bhagavad Gita begins by Arjun telling Krishna that become my guru and explain this to me. There is power in that. When you are actually asking somebody to teach you something, then you are also in turn opening yourself up to learning. So the difference between the two, most important, is if you have a problem in life, first start with asking the right question, not by making statements. Is to open yourself up to that, to learning as to why this has happened. Same question. He says, I know what is right, but I'm unable to do it. Krishna says, Arjuna says, why is it that people commit sinful acts, even unwillingly? Right? So that brings us to the question of why there is a Bhagavad Gita. So somebody has to be a villain. Okay, so the Bhagavad Gita is old. Bhagavad Gita is old, right? Arjuna has gone. Krishna may have existed, not existed. Duryodhan is over. But look at your life today, right? You have to get up at 4 in the morning to study or to go for a class, right? But you are in your bed comfortably. The alarm goes off and you don't get up and you continue to sleep. Why? Correct. That is the teaching from this. So that's what is called Shreya and Preya. So now if you read what Socrates said around 600 BC, in every one of us, there are two ruling and directing principles whose guidance we follow wherever they may lead. The one being an innate desire of pleasure, the other an acquired judgment which aspires after excellence. Right? Let me just finish this, then we'll come to all the questions, okay? Krishna answers, he says, while contemplating on the objects of the senses, one develops attachment to them. Attachment leads to desire, and from desire arises anger. Anger leads to clouding of judgment, which results in bewilderment of the memory. When the memory is bewildered, the intellect gets destroyed. And when the intellect is destroyed, one is ruined. But one who controls the mind and is free from attachment and aversion, even while using the objects of the senses, attains the grace of God. Now, this is the explanation behind why we don't ask that question, right? But what happens in our real life? What is the concept of Shreya and Preya, and what is Kriya? What are we doing? And why this particular topic? And how it works? And this is pertinent to Bhagavad Gita. Whoa, we have just 10 more minutes. I'm going to finish this and then stop here. So what we have in our stored consciousness called tendencies, right? Natural tendencies or sanskara, if you want to call it sanskara. Those are our beliefs and thought patterns. So beliefs and thought patterns, they give rise to vrittis, right? So vrittis are your thoughts based on which you take particular action. Now, when the vrittis come up based on your belief, right? You have what is called in you raga dvesha, development of likes and dislikes, right? So likes and dislikes give rise to something which is shreya, something which is preya. Those are the two things that Socrates talked about. Two ruling directing principles whose guidance we follow wherever they may lead. One being an innate desire for pleasure, preya. The other, an acquired judgment which aspires after excellence, shreya. So in spite of knowing what is good, we do what is pleasant. So you see the cycle? And what does the Bhagavad Gita teaches us? Renunciation. Renunciation of the pleasant, so that the good becomes part of your sanskara, your beliefs and your tendencies. And therefore, that leads to God realization. You see, in this one question alone is the entire sar of Bhagavad Gita as to how you can work it. What is our problem today? It's not just about sin, it's about good and pleasant also. We end up doing things which are pleasant and not necessarily good. So, how do you go past that? So, that's the explanation for that. So, if you cut out the pleasant, renounce it, and you continue with the goods come back and sit in your stored consciousness and they become part of your prakriti or tendencies or sanskara. And that leads to God realization. Right? So I'm going to stop here right now, and because we have really run out of time. Couple of questions quickly. Thank you so much. How does the story end? Arjuna wins the war, as far as we know. Sorry? Simple example that we said.
It seems to me that once we get to this God realization, it turns out to be much more pleasant than the pleasure that we're pursuing.
But we don't know that yet.
So why don't, I wonder why we aren't told that.
What?
Why doesn't Krishna say, listen, man, if you only knew how much more pleasant this path of good is than the little pleasure.
Yeah, but Don, see, here's the. Why isn't that in there? It's there everywhere. The preachers of the world have been shouting at you from eons and ages that there is a reality beyond what you perceive. How many of us believe in that? Oh, that's what I'm doing. I'm kicking you all into that ultimate reality. How about that? There you go. Mishti? Is that recording still on? Stop it. Hmm?